There is a moment amidst the thunder and ruin of the galaxy where even the most cynical loyalist must pause and consider the terrifying possibility. What if Abaddon the Despoiler is not a fool, not a puppet, but a genius of war cloaked in the guise of madness? For 10,000 years, the Imperium has laughed at him, calling him Fail-Baddon, mocking his every crusade. But now, Cadia lies shattered, the Great Rift tears reality apart, and the once derided War Master of Chaos stands triumphant amidst a galaxy in collapse. This is not the record of a buffoon. This is the shadow of a conqueror stretching across the stars. To understand whether Abaddon is a true tactical mastermind or merely the luckiest heretic to ever ride the tides of chaos, we must strip away the myths and examine the man, or what's left of him. This isn't about satire. This is about fear, ambition, and war on a scale the mind can scarcely contain. We will delve into his past, his wars, his victories, and his humiliations. And in doing so, perhaps we will glimpse the truth behind the Despoiler, not the caricature, but the burning will that may yet consume the Imperium whole. Before he became the bane of Cadia and the herald of the Great Rift, Abaddon the Despoiler was Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves, War Master Horus's right hand, and the apex predator of the XT Legion. In him was coiled the fury and pride of an entire brotherhood of demigods, tempered by the strategic acumen of a warrior raised at the feet of Horus himself. But from the very beginning, Abaddon carried a shadow, one deeper even than the Eye of Terror, cast not only by his Primarch, but by the expectations of an entire legion broken by betrayal. Ezekiel was not a mere tool of Horus. He was his enforcer, yes, but also his conscience, confidant, and heir in all but name. It was Abaddon who often executed the will of the War Master with a clarity and decisiveness that belied his younger years. He was a master of Legion tactics, a war leader who understood not only how to kill, but why to kill, and what message each death could deliver. During the Great Crusade, there was reverence for him among the Astartes of the Luna Wolves. He wasn't just the strongest. He was the one who could make the impossible look like a calculated inevitability. But loyalty, when wrenched from its moorings, becomes something darker. When Horus fell to chaos and the heresy ignited the galaxy in flame, Abaddon's world shattered. Yet, unlike the broken remnants of many other legions, Abaddon did not flinch or falter. He embraced the war to come not as a blinded follower of dark gods, but as a son determined to avenge what he saw as the betrayal of a father. Not Horus's betrayal of the Emperor, but the Emperor's betrayal of Horus. In this inversion lies the seed of Abaddon's enduring identity. His fury is not the random madness of a raving heretic. It is the cold, calculating vengeance of a son who believes the galaxy must burn so that the truth of that betrayal is never forgotten. In those dark days after the Siege of Terra, when the traitor legions fractured, fled, and fell into anarchy, Abaddon disappeared into the Eye of Terror. Many assumed he had perished or devolved into a mindless warlord like so many others. But within that nightmare realm, he did something few of his peers managed. He endured. He did not yield to demonic possession. He did not become a mad godling chasing fleeting glories. Instead, he watched. He learned. He adapted. And he remembered. Here is where the question begins to turn. Was Abaddon's survival in the Eye of Terror mere luck? Or was it the first test of his strategic brilliance? To maintain a semblance of order among the lunatic warbands of the traitor legions requires a will of iron and a mind as sharp as any blade. In the absence of Horus, someone had to fill the vacuum. The fact that it was Abaddon, and not any of the Primarchs, not the more sorcerous or favored champions, speaks to something deeper. The gods did not crown him. He crowned himself, dragging unity out of chaos through fire and domination. That is not luck. That is power, yet the shadow of Horus never left him. Abaddon wears the talon of Horus not as a tribute, but as a burden a constant reminder of the failure he refuses to repeat. Where Horus was undone by pride, Abaddon is driven by a colder ambition. He has no illusions of godhood. He does not seek to supplant the Emperor on a golden throne. His vision is more insidious, a galaxy in perpetual war, the Imperium drowned in despair, and the memory of Horus not as a fallen hero, but as the harbinger of inevitable collapse. In many ways, Abaddon is what Horus should have been, a war master not blinded by divine delusions, but one who understands that terror, persistence, and ideological warfare can be more powerful than any sword. Understanding Abaddon's roots, his transformation from first captain to despoiler, is key to answering our question, because if he had been a mere brute, a lucky warlord, or a pawn of the gods, he would have perished in the first century of exile. Instead, he not only survived, he became the linchpin of Chaos Undivided, something even the most powerful demon primarchs failed to achieve. He didn't inherit power, he built it. And he did so with the memories of the heresy bleeding through every choice he made. Perhaps what makes Abaddon so terrifying isn't that he has Horus's ambition, it's that he has Horus's mind, unclouded by weakness. 10,000 years of war began not with a fluke victory, but with a decision made in the shattered aftermath of betrayal, that the long war would not be about winning a throne, but about making sure no throne could ever stand again. When Abaddon emerged from the Eye of Terror to unify the scattered remnants of the traitor legions, he did not simply resurrect the sons of Horus, he obliterated them. The very name was cast into the void, a final rejection of failure and a symbolic rebirth. From the corpse of the old legion rose the Black Legion, an entity not shackled to the past, but forged in the crucible of chaos and vengeance. This act alone sets Abaddon apart. While others wallowed in the ruins of nostalgia, he looked ahead, shaping a new identity that could endure the long war. The Reformation was no mere rebranding. It was a brutal, calculated purge of weakness. Many among the sons of Horus resisted the dissolution of their lineage, clinging to their fallen Primarch's name like a talisman. Abaddon slaughtered them without hesitation. In doing so, he demonstrated the cold will of a leader not bound by sentiment, a man who understood that to command the future, one must annihilate the past. This wasn't luck. It was a profound understanding of the psychology of warriors, of the need to give them something new to fight for, not just vengeance, but meaning. The Black Legion was born not as a replacement, but as a synthesis. Abaddon recruited not only from his own shattered kin, but from across the Eye of Terror. Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Word-bearers. They came, drawn by his strength, by the promise of purpose in a galaxy that had long since descended into fragmented brutality. Unlike the Legion-specific warbands that clung to old banners, the Black Legion was Chaos Undivided, incarnate. It did not serve one god, it served war itself. And under Abaddon, it became a machine of annihilation, its black armor a symbol of total rejection of both the Imperium and the old legions. Forging such a force was not an act of charisma alone. It required a tactical mind of immense subtlety. Abaddon had to navigate the ambitions of rival champions, the manipulations of demons, and the ever-watchful eyes of the Chaos Gods. Any false step would have meant his obliteration, or worse, his absorption into the schemes of entities that consumed souls for amusement. But Abaddon played the game with ruthless precision. He refused to bend the knee, and yet still earned the blessings of the gods, not by devotion, but by results. The gods respect power, and Abaddon delivered it to them in spades. This unity came at a cost. The Black Legion was never a family. It was a weapon, and like all weapons, it required constant blood to stay sharp. Abaddon enforced his authority with calculated violence. Dissenters were not argued with, they were obliterated. Warbands were pitted against each other to test loyalty. Demon engines and human cults were folded into the structure, not as equals, but as tools. Every crusade he launched was not just an attack on the Imperium. It was a test of cohesion, of message, of whether the Black Legion could survive another century. And they did. More than that, they thrived. From a scattered brotherhood of failures, Abaddon built the most feared chaos force in the galaxy, not because they won every battle, but because they never truly lost. Each campaign refined them. Each defeat hardened their resolve. The Black Legion became an idea, and ideas are far harder to kill than men. Abaddon's genius was not just in battlefield tactics, but in mimetic warfare. He turned the Black Legion into the symbol of eternal rebellion. Compare this to other warlords, and the distinction becomes painfully clear. Where others burned bright and faded, like Huron Blackheart or even the demon Primarchs, Abaddon endured. His legion became a culture, a legacy, and an engine of destruction that outlived any single victory or setback. This is not luck. This is doctrine. A long war not measured in victories, but in corrosion, infiltration, and ideological decay. Abaddon's establishment of the Black Legion was a masterstroke of military strategy and psychological warfare. He gave the fragmented warriors of chaos a new standard, one not mired in the decaying dreams of the heresy, but one focused entirely on the ruin of the present. He did not offer salvation, he offered clarity. And in the warp-fed madness of the post-heresy galaxy, clarity is more powerful than any weapon. In the end, the founding of the Black Legion proves that Abaddon is not a slave to the past, but a commander of the now. He rebuilt not just a legion, but a movement. And in doing so, he laid the foundation for every crusade, every strike against the Imperium, every whisper of terror in the void. If that is not the work of a tactical genius, then perhaps the word has no meaning. The first Black Crusade was not a storm. It was a probe. In a galaxy still reeling from the heresy, where the Imperium struggled to maintain cohesion and chaos warbands ravaged one another in the eye of terror, Abaddon stepped forward and declared war anew. But this was no blind charge. The First Crusade, often overlooked or dismissed, was the opening move in a game measured not in battles, but in centuries. It was the test, the proving ground. The moment Abaddon ceased being merely a survivor of Horus and became something more dangerous, a man with a plan. It began with the recovery of the Talon of Horus and the annihilation of rival claimants to the title of War Master. This alone was not a show of strength, but of narrative control. Abaddon was not content with being the most powerful warlord. He needed to be seen as the inheritor of a legacy, reforged in his own image. The First Crusade made that narrative real. He moved not just to strike the Imperium, but to unify the Eye. Every fortress razed, every world corrupted, was as much about demonstrating strength to his enemies as it was about delivering pain to the Emperor. The targets of the First Crusade were not haphazard. Abaddon focused his forces on the Cadian Gate, a region of critical strategic importance that linked the Eye of Terror to the wider galaxy. The Imperium had spent centuries fortifying it, turning Cadia into a bulwark against the tides of madness. To assault it was not reckless bravado. It was an assessment of weak points, a strategic autopsy. Abaddon wanted to know where the bones of the Imperium were most brittle, and he found them. Of course, the First Black Crusade did not end in triumph. It was repulsed, as many would gleefully point out. But that is to miss the point entirely. Abaddon did not need to win. He needed to measure. The engagements around Cadia revealed not just the strength of Imperial defenses, but the limits of Imperial cohesion. How long did it take for reinforcements to arrive? How effectively did Sector Command coordinate with the High Lords? How resilient were the Guard, the Navy, the Adeptus Mechanicus? Abaddon took notes in blood, and each failure was a lesson. But even within those so-called failures were moments of tactical brilliance. His use of warp corridors to bypass fortified systems. His deployment of demonic vanguards to soften targets before committing marine forces. His precision strikes on communication relays and astropathic beacons, these were not the tactics of a blundering heretic. They were scalpel cuts in a war usually waged with axes, and importantly, Abaddon withdrew in a way that preserved his core forces. He did not bleed his legion for glory. He retreated, regrouped, and refined. In war, knowing when to fall back is often as critical as knowing when to attack. Perhaps the most significant outcome of the First Crusade was not material, but psychological. The Imperium began to speak his name again, not as a relic of the heresy, not as a failed warlord, but as a new threat. That fear, that whisper of Abaddon, was a weapon. It sowed unease in commanders. It spread through the ranks of the Astra Militarum. The ecclesiarchy began to brand him as a new arch-heretic, and the Inquisition took notice. All this from a campaign that failed. Within the eye, the consequences were even greater. Abaddon returned not as a disgraced warlord, but as a visionary. He brought spoils, slaves, demonic trophies. More importantly, he brought a vision of a united chaos war machine, not shackled by the rivalries of gods, but bound by purpose. He had proven that the Imperium could be hurt, and that he, not the demon Primarchs, was the one to do it. More war bands flocked to him. More champions knelt, not in worship, but in acknowledgement of strength. Thus, the First Black Crusade should not be read as an isolated conflict, but as the opening chapter in a doctrine of attrition. Abaddon had begun to lay the psychological and strategic groundwork for a millennium-long campaign. He was testing the board not to claim it, but to break it. Calling this luck is to misunderstand the nature of war on a galactic scale. This was not a dice roll. It was a probe of defenses, a flex of legitimacy, and a political maneuver to consolidate power in both the warp and real space. In the end, the First Black Crusade was not a loss. It was a declaration. The long war had truly begun. To command the forces of chaos is to wrestle with madness made manifest, a maelstrom of ambition, treachery, and divine interference where loyalty is a weakness and power is measured in blood and souls. Yet Abaddon has navigated this nightmare not merely with survival, but with ascendancy. His dealings with the Chaos Gods and their demonic lieutenants are not those of a supplicant. They are the transactions of a warlord who knows that to serve too devoutly is to be consumed. The alliances he forges, the bargains he strikes, these are the acts not of a pawn, but of a player at the highest, most dangerous table in existence. Abaddon's genius lies in his refusal to become a mere champion of one god. The path of devotion is paved with oblivion. One need only look at Lucius of the Emperor's Children or Karn of the World Eaters to see what happens when chaos truly takes hold. They are powerful, yes, but they are also enslaved, bound to eternal loops of murder, pleasure, or decay. Abaddon stands apart. He wields the powers of all four gods and bows to none. This balance is not luck. It is a deliberate lifelong policy of spiritual realpolitik. He is favored by Khorne for his martial prowess and relentless drive. He is whispered to by Tzeentch, who admires his long-term strategies and subtle manipulations. Nurgle finds delight in his endurance, his refusal to fade or break. And even Slaanesh, patron of excess and perfection, sees in Abaddon the grandeur of unrelenting ambition. Yet none of them own him. None can claim him fully. That is his power, to receive the gifts without becoming a gift. This balancing act is extraordinarily rare. Most champions of chaos fall into the orbit of one god, becoming their avatar in the material world. But Abaddon refuses to be drawn in. He uses their tools, demon weapons, warpcraft, prophetic visions, and discards them as needed. He has walked the halls of demon worlds, negotiated with the most untrustworthy beings in existence, and emerged not only alive, but enhanced. This is not fortune, it is mastery. Take, for instance, the demon blade Drachnien. Abaddon did not stumble upon this relic. He sought it. He broke the bindings. He tamed a weapon that is, by all accounts, the embodied hate of the warp. Wielding Drachnien is not simply using a sword, it is carrying the screaming will of uncreation into battle. And yet, Abaddon maintains dominance over it. He does not serve the blade, he commands it. This is perhaps the clearest metaphor for his relationship with chaos itself, always dominant, never submissive. His alliances extend beyond weapons and gods. Abaddon has brought demon primarchs into his campaigns, not as masters but as allies. Mortarion, Magnus, Angron, these beings are nightmares incarnate, and yet Abaddon coordinates with them, directs them, even manipulates them when needed. He understands their flaws, their pride, their bindings to their respective gods, and he exploits these dynamics with the calm of a grand strategist who sees the board not in pieces, but in patterns. This ability to work with creatures who devour mortals by the thousands is no small feat. It requires an iron will, a flawless understanding of chaos psychology, and a vision that even demons cannot easily unravel. Abaddon plays them as much as they attempt to play him. The fact that he has not been reduced to a puppet, that he is still Ezekiel, not a thing of fangs and wings and madness, is perhaps his greatest strategic victory. There are whispers, of course. Some say Abaddon is already lost, that he is a vessel and does not know it, that the gods merely allow his arrogance to persist because he is useful. And perhaps that is true. But if so, it only speaks to the deeper brilliance of his approach. For even if he is dancing on a blade edge suspended above damnation, he has done so for 10,000 years without faltering. In a realm where loyalty is suicide and power corrupts into monstrosity, Abaddon has charted a path of control. He is not a cleric, not a prophet, not a beast. He is a general, a war master, a man who uses gods as weapons and refuses to kneel even to eternity itself. If luck plays a role in such a dance, it is the luck that comes only to those who never stop moving, never stop striking, never stop watching the stars for the moment to kill a god. Abaddon's pursuit of relics, forbidden lore, and archaeotech is often overshadowed by the dramatic spectacle of his crusades. Yet it is here, in these shadowy quests and esoteric acquisitions, that one sees the intellect behind the sword. No clearer example exists than his relentless campaign to claim the Talon of Horus, and later, the Blackstone fortresses. These were not acts of vanity or simple power grabs. They were methodical moves in a strategy that transcended millennia. The Talon of Horus was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a relic of the War Master whose shadow loomed over everything Abaddon would become. To reclaim it was to stake his claim not only as heir to Horus's legacy, but as the corrector of its failings. But this wasn't a sentimental decision. The Talon was fused with a combi bolter and lightning claws capable of tearing through even Terminator armor. More importantly, it carried psychic and warp signatures that bolstered Abaddon's connection to the Eye and its demonic powers. Reclaiming it from the Black Legion's fractious warlords required political maneuvering, ruthless slaughter, and symbolic timing. And in doing so, Abaddon did more than arm himself. He unified his legion's identity around a singular vision. But far more significant were the Blackstone fortresses. These ancient constructs, older than the Imperium, are among the most terrifying weapons the galaxy has ever seen. Capable of channeling immense warp energy and obliterating entire fleets, they are keys to reshaping the strategic balance of the galaxy. Abaddon's acquisition of multiple fortresses was no accident. He hunted them across dead worlds, abandoned sectors, and warp-haunted regions. He devoted entire campaigns not to glorious battles, but to retrieval operations, working through agents and demons alike to secure these weapons. Consider what it means to wield one such fortress, let alone several. It is not simply about firepower. It is about mobility, presence, fear. To have a Blackstone fortress in a war zone is to make every Imperial admiral think twice. It is a force multiplier not just in raw strength, but in psychological dominance. Abaddon used them not just to destroy, but to blockade, to draw out defenders, to force the Imperium into costly and desperate actions. Their mere appearance in a sector sent entire subsectors into panic, and this too was part of his plan. The genius of these acquisitions is that they were integrated into a larger doctrine. Abaddon did not merely hoard power, he deployed it with terrifying precision. The fortresses allowed him to strike deep into Imperial space, beyond traditional warp routes. They gave him staging grounds from which to launch surgical strikes. They served as prisons, as temples, as mobile fortresses of corruption that bled reality into nightmare. And critically, they forced the Imperium to overstretch. To respond to the threat of a fortress, the High Lords had to move fleets, reassign troops, thin defenses elsewhere. This was war by logistical strangulation. It wasn't just archaeotech either. Abaddon sought out arcane knowledge and forbidden lore, working through cult networks and ancient pacts. He employed sorcerers not as spiritual guides, but as living data engines, compiling warp data, scrying future outcomes, charting the most volatile parts of the Great Rift. He utilized Dark Mechanicum constructs not as curiosities, but as field artillery, psyker snaring traps, and bioweapon dispensers. These were not the tools of a zealot. They were the instruments of a mind that understood war not only as a contest of force, but of information, misdirection, and logistics. At every point, Abaddon's behavior demonstrates an understanding of strategic infrastructure. Where most warlords demand blood and fire, he seeks maps, schematics, artifacts. He does not need to win every battle if he can make the next war unwinnable for his enemies. The Blackstone fortresses are not monuments to his power, they are blueprints for galactic destabilization. To dismiss this as luck is to ignore the complexity of the acquisitions. The fortresses were not simply lying in wait. They were defended by Xenos constructs, psychic traps, and warp anomalies that would have destroyed a lesser mind. But Abaddon persisted. He adapted. He employed traitor scholars, enslaved ancient minds, even struck temporary pacts with Xenos races to achieve his goals. And when he finally brought the fortresses to bear, the Imperium understood, too late, that this was never about trophies. It was about infrastructure for total war. There is a mind at work here. A mind that understands that in a galaxy as vast as the one humanity calls home, victory goes not only to the strongest sword, but to the one who builds the longest shadow. And through the Talon of Horus, the Blackstone fortresses, and countless forbidden relics, Abaddon has built a shadow long enough to eclipse stars. The 13th Black Crusade was not a campaign. It was a cataclysm. For centuries, the name Abaddon had conjured mockery as often as dread, with each failed crusade adding fuel to the fires of imperial satire. But all such voices died in the firestorms of Cadia. In the burning skies above that fortress world, the galaxy learned the terrible truth. The long war had never been about single battles, but about setting the board. And when the final piece moved, it tore reality apart. Abaddon did not strike blindly. His preparations were labyrinthine, unfolding across decades and parsecs. Cults were seeded in advance. Traitor Mechanicus cells worked in secret. Demons were summoned to infiltrate and destabilize. The Blackstone fortresses were positioned like blades circling a jugular. Then, with the precision of a scalpel and the force of a thunderhead, he struck. Cadia, long the sentinel of the Cadian Gate, became his true target, not to claim, but to break. The campaign was masterful in execution. Abaddon shattered orbital defenses with overwhelming force, deploying not just chaos fleets, but warped monstrosities and demonic constructs that nullified conventional tactics. He utilized the Blackstone fortresses to their full horror, focusing warp energy to rupture void shields and peel apart space stations. But his most decisive stroke came not from the barrel of a gun, but from the culmination of ancient knowledge. The activation of a captured Blackstone fortress within the gravity well of Cadia's own star. The resultant energy cascade cracked Cadia's crust, setting off tectonic devastation on a scale not seen since the war in heaven. Yet even as the planet died, its defenders fought with such ferocity that they nearly turned back the tide. Nearly. It was then that Abaddon unveiled the true depth of his cunning. The use of the Cadian pylons, ancient Necron technology designed to stabilize the warp, was turned against them. By destroying the pylons, he unleashed a warp storm of such magnitude that it tore the veil of reality itself and gave birth to the Cicatrix Maledictum. This moment cannot be understated. With the destruction of Cadia and the collapse of the pylons, the Imperium was split in two. A wound was cut across the galaxy that even Guilliman could not close. The Astronomicon flickered, millions of worlds lost contact, and for the first time since the heresy, the Imperium faced true existential paralysis. This was not merely war. It was metaphysical warfare, aimed not at killing men, but at destroying the very order by which they live. Critics still argue that Abaddon failed to conquer the Segmentum Obscurus, that he did not hold Cadia in the end. But such analysis is blinkered. He did not need to hold. He needed to shatter. Every strategic analysis must confront this. The Imperium lost its most important defensive bastion. The Cicatrix Maledictum now bisects the galaxy. Demons rampage freely. The Adeptus Astartes are scattered. The Inquisition is overwhelmed. And every single piece of this collapse stems from the decisions made by one War Master in the shadow of a dying star. Perhaps most chilling is what followed. Abaddon did not rest. He did not declare victory and vanish. He pressed forward into Ultramar itself, launching assaults on Holy Terra's doorstep. He coordinated with Mortarion, unleashed plagues, fractured sectors. His wars became less about domination and more about entropy, ensuring that nothing could be stable, that no victory could be final. This is not the behavior of a mere conqueror. It is the doctrine of annihilation. If luck had played a role, if fortune or divine madness had handed him Cadia's fall, it would have crumbled in his hands like so many others. But Abaddon has maintained momentum in the years since. He has not been overwhelmed by the rift he helped open. He has used it as a highway of horror, unleashing wave after wave of darkness into a weakened Imperium. He has become the eye of the storm, a fixed point around which galaxies twist and scream. The 13th Black Crusade ended Cadia, but more than that, it began the Age of Woe. It proved that Abaddon was never playing to win battles. He was playing to end the game. That is not luck. That is vision. That is strategy elevated to prophecy. In the fires of Cadia, the galaxy burned, and the name Abaddon the Despoiler was no longer a joke. It was the echo of doom in every transmission from the front. For many, the easiest way to dismiss Abaddon's legacy is to count his so-called failures. 12 crusades, 12 retreats, a dozen grand offensives that ended without the Imperium on its knees. To the uninitiated, to the meme-forged minds of Vox satirists and armchair admirals, this sounds like proof of incompetence. But those who understand warfare, true warfare, measured in centuries and blood rivers, know this framing is both deceptive and dangerous. None of Abaddon's previous crusades were meant to win in the conventional sense. They were operations of attrition, of destabilization, of reconnaissance in force on a galactic scale. Each was a data-gathering massacre, a hammer blow to a different segment of the Imperium's armor. And while they did not crack the whole, each one splintered something. Whether it was morale, infrastructure, military focus, or psychic integrity, every crusade had its role in a grander tapestry. This is not conjecture, it is pattern recognition. Consider the Second Black Crusade, which crippled the Scarus sector and opened the first true warp corridor into Segmentum Obscurus. Or the Eighth, which targeted the Maelstrom Zone, resulting in a power vacuum that allowed renegade forces to grow unchecked. Even the less celebrated Fourth and Sixth Crusades created prolonged supply chain stress that forced the Adeptus Administratum to reallocate critical resources. What seems at first glance to be random destruction is, upon deeper reflection, the systematic erosion of imperial capability. Abaddon's genius lies in his understanding of time. He is not in a hurry. He is not playing for a single battle. He is bleeding the Imperium over 10,000 years, training his forces, recruiting from 100 war bands, and experimenting with methods of warfare that no loyalist could imagine. Where the Imperium sees failure, he sees iterative success. Like a dark mirror to Guilliman's logistic brilliance, Abaddon employs chaos not as disarray, but as entropy directed by will. And failure, real or perceived, has its uses. Every time he lost, he learned. He returned stronger. He adapted tactics, upgraded fleets, replaced fallen champions with more vicious and effective ones. The Black Legion hardened in the forge of these losses, evolving into a force no longer reliant on a single doctrine or dogma. Abaddon understood that to be feared, he had to be resilient. Each crusade was both an offensive and a training ground, not just for himself, but for the future of Chaos Undivided. One must also consider the psychological warfare at play. The repeated crusades kept the Imperium on edge, always bracing for the next hammerfall. This state of perpetual readiness drained morale, corrupted logistics, and forced strategic overextension. The Administratum, already a bloated corpse riddled with inefficiency, buckled under the constant threat. Inquisitors turned against each other over false leads. The Sisters of Battle burned entire worlds to preemptively purge heresy, often based on rumors seeded by Abaddon's agents. These are not battlefield victories. They are victories of paranoia and despair. The greatest misconception is the notion that a crusade must end in planetary occupation or conquest to be considered successful. But Abaddon does not seek territory. He seeks collapse. To hold ground is to invite counterattack. To spread corruption is to rot the foundation from within. Every failed crusade planted seeds that would grow into rebellions, cults, schisms. It is not always the fire that kills the tree. Sometimes it is the termites. And yes, there were setbacks, there were losses, but even those must be weighed against the gains. What Abaddon lacks in glorious victories, he more than compensates for in his ability to survive and return stronger. No demon Primarch can claim that. No rival warlord has maintained relevance for 10,000 years. In the arena of eternal war, to endure is to triumph. To call the 12 Crusades failures is to misunderstand their purpose. They were not strikes meant to end the Imperium in a single blow. They were the long, slow turning of the screw, each one a test, a weakening, a message. And in the wake of the 13th, when Cadia shattered and the Great Rift was born, that message was clear. Abaddon had never failed. He had been building, layer upon layer, shadow upon shadow, until the weight of his will broke the spine of the galaxy. To command the Black Legion is to hold dominion over a boiling ocean of madness. It is not a structured force like the Space Marines of the Imperium, bound by codex and doctrine. The Black Legion is a storm of egos, a tide of fallen champions, demon engines, cult legions, and traitor warbands, each a powder keg of ambition. That Abaddon not only leads them but molds them into a unified war machine is one of the most staggering feats in the history of warfare. The true challenge of leading a chaos war host is not tactical, it is psychological. Each warband within the Black Legion was once part of a different legion, each with its own culture, trauma, and godly patronage. Some are devout to Khorne, others to Slaanesh. Some demand autonomy, others are bound to demonic pacts. Many obey only out of fear or ambition. And yet, when Abaddon calls, they march. This is not because of tradition. It is not because of loyalty. It is because Abaddon has made himself essential to their continued relevance in the long war. He rules through force, yes, but also through ideology. Abaddon has never presented himself as a messiah or divine champion. Instead, he offers his followers something more seductive: purpose. In a galaxy of endless war, he gives them a banner under which their hatred, fury, and madness can be harnessed. He understands their drives, their traumas, their need to believe they can still matter in a universe that abandoned them. And so, he forges their spite into weapons. To maintain this control, Abaddon employs a brutally pragmatic command structure. The Black Legion does not function through a strict hierarchy, but a flexible lattice of allegiance, enforced by violence and reward. Champions who fail are replaced without hesitation. Warbands that disobey are turned into examples. But those who prove useful are elevated, their names etched into new legends. Abaddon cultivates loyalty not through love, but through opportunity and consequence. Under him, even the lowest traitor knows that victory will be acknowledged, and that failure will be final. Yet beyond fear, there is something more. Admiration. Many of his commanders, former captains of shattered legions, arch-traitors in their own right, could have carved their own fiefdoms. But they follow Abaddon because they recognize something terrifying and rare, a leader who does not falter. In 10,000 years, he has not succumbed to madness, to godhood, or to stagnation. His singularity of vision has become a gravitational force, pulling even the most erratic warbands into alignment. He also understands the value of delegation. Abaddon surrounds himself with individuals of specialized skill, sorcerers, strategists, demonic lieutenants. He does not micromanage. He unleashes. He gives them the latitude to employ their talents while ensuring they serve the broader doctrine of the Long War. This is not the hallmark of a tyrant. It is the trait of a commander who knows how to scale authority without losing control. In many ways, the Black Legion is a reflection of its master. It is adaptable, ruthless, ideologically fluid, and terrifyingly effective. Unlike the rigid, brittle structures of the Imperium, it evolves. It incorporates Xenos technologies, forbidden sorcery, and battlefield tactics ripped from 1,000 worlds. Where Guilliman represents the fossilized memory of a dead era, Abaddon embodies the chaos of survival. He does not demand purity, only results. This flexibility has allowed the Black Legion to strike anywhere, in any form. Sometimes it is an armada of apocalypse. Sometimes it is a whisper in the dark, a cult uprising guided by unseen hands. Sometimes it is a ritual, a sacrifice, a planet turned inside out to open a new rift. It is everywhere and nowhere, because Abaddon has built it not as a legion, but as a movement. A hydra of rebellion against the order of man, fueled by despair and hatred and the belief that the galaxy can be broken. To keep such a thing functioning is not a matter of brute strength. It is art. It is politics. It is strategy on a scale no imperial general could ever endure. That Abaddon has done so for millennia, through loss and resurgence, speaks to a brilliance that cannot be dismissed. The Black Legion is not lucky. It is led. And it is that leadership, brutal, cunning, relentless, that keeps it from turning in on itself like every other traitor force. Under Abaddon, it does not just survive. It conquers. Abaddon's doctrine, known as the Long War, is unlike any military philosophy ever crafted in the Imperium. It is not a series of tactical prescriptions or battlefield formations. It is an ideology of corrosion, a blueprint for civilizational decay. It acknowledges that the Imperium is too vast to conquer outright, so instead it seeks to poison it from within. To destabilize, corrupt, fragment, and degrade, not in a single year or decade, but over millennia. It is patient apocalypse. The Long War is rooted in Abaddon's understanding that the Imperium cannot be toppled by force alone. Its strength lies in inertia, its mindless persistence, its ability to endure despite incompetence, heresy, and decay. So he does not simply fight battles. He undermines foundations. He turns loyalty into suspicion, faith into fanaticism, defense into overreach. He seeds cults that fester for centuries before rising. He sponsors rebellions that trigger brutal suppressions, knowing the suppression will birth greater hate. He infects systems with doubt, then watches as the bureaucracies devour themselves in the name of purity. In this doctrine, every action serves multiple purposes. A raid might destroy a Promethium depot, but also cripple the supply chain for an entire subsector, triggering famine, which leads to planetary unrest, which requires Arbite's intervention, which weakens other regions left undefended. It is domino warfare, and Abaddon is the architect of the tipping point. This doctrine also reflects his profound grasp of time as a weapon. The Long War is not about immediate results. It is about cumulative effect. Where the Imperium reacts in centuries, Abaddon plans in millennia. His strategies span generations. He is not trying to win, he is trying to exhaust. Because he knows that sooner or later, the Imperium's mechanisms will fail, not from one blow, but from 1,000 cracks. What makes this even more insidious is that it's scalable. The Long War can be waged by fleets and legions, but also by single agents, by whispers, by documents planted in administratum files, by demons hiding in data looms. It is both macro and micro, galactic and intimate. Abaddon's genius lies in creating a system that empowers his followers to act in ways aligned with the doctrine without requiring direct orders. He has created a culture of destruction, a decentralized chaos that still moves with purpose. Some compare this to the Alpha Legion's operations, but there is a crucial difference. The Alpha Legion wages secret wars to destabilize and manipulate. Abaddon wages them to annihilate. His vision does not end with confusion. It ends with fire and ruin. Where the Alpha Legion thrives in shadows, the Long War brings the light, the searing apocalyptic light of truth that nothing the Imperium builds can last. And unlike many Chaos leaders, Abaddon understands the need for coherence. The Long War is not about wanton carnage. It is targeted entropy. He directs his forces to preserve critical assets, to avoid drawing unnecessary divine attention, to retreat when the cost is too high. In doing so, he ensures that Chaos is always resourced, always capable, always prepared for the next blow. He resists the self-destructive impulses that devour so many of his peers, choosing instead to nurture a machine of collapse. This philosophy has paid off in horrifying ways, from the fall of Cadia to the endless uprisings in the Segmentum Pacificus, from the quiet war in the Noctis Aeterna to the rise of chaos cults within the Astra Militarum itself. The Long War has proven effective beyond any other doctrine of destruction. It doesn't just kill, it changes the target. It makes the Imperium resemble chaos without ever realizing it. This is not luck, this is ideological brilliance, a genius not of the battlefield, but of the soul. Abaddon has weaponized despair, bureaucracy, fear, and hope, twisting each into a dagger pointed at humanity's heart. The Long War is his masterstroke, not a campaign, but a curse, a promise that the Imperium will not fall in fire, but in silence, crumbling as it forgets why it even stands. And as each generation forgets a little more, as each world slides further into dysfunction, Abaddon does not laugh. He waits, because the Long War does not need to be won in his lifetime. It only needs to be unwinnable. Comparing Abaddon to other legendary war masters and tacticians in the galaxy reveals the unique nature of his leadership and the scale of his ambition. He is not merely a successor to Horus. He is a divergence, a counterpoint, a shadow that learns from light and uses its own darkness to swallow entire stars. When placed beside other leaders like Robut Guilliman, Perturabo, or even Horus himself, Abaddon's genius takes on a far more sinister clarity. Start with Horus, the original war master, handpicked by the Emperor, a demigod among demigods. Charismatic, beloved, and brilliant, Horus was once the pinnacle of humanity's martial prowess. But Horus fell because he believed in swift victory. He believed that a single decisive strike could remake the galaxy. He sought to replace the Emperor with himself, thinking he could reshape mankind's destiny with one act of rebellion. And for all his power, he was undone by pride, by his failure to understand that empires, like faith, do not fall in a day. Abaddon learned that lesson. He does not seek the throne. He does not promise utopia. He knows that swift victories are fleeting, and that the real power lies in attrition, in the erosion of belief, structure, and cohesion. Unlike Horus, he is not a visionary blinded by godhood. He is a pragmatist who has watched the galaxy rot and decided to guide its collapse with a steady, unyielding hand. Then there is Robout Guilliman, the ultimate loyalist counterpoint. A master of logistics, law, and imperial order, Guilliman represents the codified response to chaos, structure as salvation. But his weakness is his dependence on order itself. Guilliman must restore, must manage, must govern. Abaddon has no such burden. He is free to destroy, to adapt, to reforge his forces without concern for purity or tradition. Where Guilliman must be a ruler, Abaddon is a force of nature. One builds walls, the other becomes the tide. Perturabo, the Iron Warrior Primarch, offers another foil. Tactical savant, siege master, and peerless engineer of war, Perturabo understands the value of long-term strategy and infrastructure. In many ways, he and Abaddon share a cold detachment, a love of logic and inevitability. But Perturabo was broken by bitterness, by his need for recognition, by his resentment. He became a weapon of destruction, lashing out without vision. Abaddon, by contrast, uses that destruction to build, not cities or bastions, but ideologies and movements. He shapes collapse into a strategy. Perturabo builds tombs, Abaddon builds nightmares that walk. Even among the demon primarchs, creatures of immense power, ancient knowledge, and divine favor, Abaddon holds a unique place. Mortarion, Magnus, Angron, Fulgrim, all are bound, ultimately, to the whims of their patrons. They are icons of singular powers. Abaddon, alone, has kept his autonomy. He has used their strengths without becoming enslaved to their madness. In that sense, he has surpassed them. He does not need to be a Primarch to command them. He needs only vision and victory. Some would argue that Abaddon cannot be compared to these figures because he lacks the same gene-forged origin, the same mythic status. But that is precisely what makes his achievements so disturbing. He is not a Primarch. He is not a god. He is a man, a genetically enhanced, warp-forged, remorseless man, yes, but still a man. And yet he has matched or surpassed every one of them in strategic impact. The galaxy is more changed by his hand than by any other Chaos leader in the last 10,000 years. And what of others? Huron Blackheart, Typhus, Fabius Bile, all powerful in their own right, but none have achieved what Abaddon has. They rule fragments, cling to old glories or mad dreams. Abaddon commands a movement. He is the closest thing Chaos has to an emperor, not in title but in consequence. Even compared to imperial heroes, Saint Celestine, Lord Solar Macarius, Sebastian Thor, Abaddon is something different. They shine briefly, burning hot, achieving miracles in decades or centuries. Abaddon endures. His war is not of decades, but of eons. His victories are not measured in planets, but in the decay of an entire civilization. In the great ledger of galactic war, Abaddon stands not as a lesser Horus or a failed conqueror. He is the antithesis of stability, the eternal rebellion. The whisper that says, "What you build will die." He is not the greatest general because he wins the most battles. He is the greatest because he has made every battle mean something and made the galaxy itself the price of defiance. To speak of Abaddon without addressing the maelstrom inside him is to miss the most human and most chilling element of his existence. Beneath the armor, beyond the titles and weapons and wars, lies a psyche forged in loss, defiance, and obsession. If there is genius in Abaddon's strategy, it is only rivaled by the labyrinthine depths of his mind, a mind shaped not only by purpose, but by pain. He was once Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves, a warrior who stood shoulder to shoulder with Horus. He loved his Primarch with a loyalty so intense it bordered on the sacred. That bond, that reverence, was shattered in the heresy, not merely by Horus's fall, but by the consequences of that betrayal. Abaddon did not just lose a leader. He lost a father, a purpose, a future. The galaxy he had fought to build became a prison of madness, and it broke something inside him. But unlike so many of his brothers, Abaddon did not surrender to despair. He did not disappear into demonic delusion or degenerate pleasure. He clenched his grief into a weapon. He turned mourning into motion. There is no serenity in him. There is no peace. There is only will, an endless drive to make the galaxy bleed for what it did to his father, to his legion, to his sense of meaning. And in this, we see the seed of his terrifying strength. He has no illusions left, only goals. Abaddon's psychological profile reveals an individual of immense internal control. He has stood before gods and refused to kneel. He has been offered immortality and chosen purpose instead. This is not because he lacks temptation. It is because he understands the cost. He has watched others fall to madness, become avatars of ruin, lose themselves in ecstasy or rage. He fears that fate, not because he craves sanity, but because he values agency. He refuses to be anyone's puppet, even in damnation. That refusal defines his every action. His strategies are layered with contingencies. His movements are calculated to maximize flexibility. His command structure avoids over-reliance on any single asset. He fears loss of control, not out of cowardice, but out of a profound understanding of chaos. He knows what happened to Horus, and he will not repeat it. But there is a darkness within him, deeper than even the warp can reach. Abaddon is a man who knows he is becoming something more, or less. Every year, every crusade, every sacrifice chips away at his humanity. He does not lament this, he accepts it. But it leaves a question. Does Abaddon still believe in anything beyond destruction? Is there a part of him that hopes for an end, for rest, for some meaning behind the pain? Some say yes. That buried deep beneath the Despoiler is still Ezekiel, the brother, the warrior, the idealist who once believed in a golden future. Others argue that such sentiment is long dead, burned away in the fires of Cadia and the screaming echoes of the warp, that all that remains is a will to power, shaped by trauma into something unrecognizable. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Abaddon may no longer feel hope, but he remembers what it was, and that memory fuels his hatred. It is this emotional complexity that makes him more dangerous than any demon prince. He is not mad, he is not impulsive, he is not a slave to emotion, but he understands it intimately and uses it as a weapon. He manipulates belief, cultivates despair, and wields loyalty like a scalpel. He does not fight for glory, he fights for a galaxy that will remember, that will suffer, that will never again laugh at his pain. Abaddon is a tragedy wrapped in armor, a mind that refuses to break, even as it bleeds, a heart that beats not with love or fear, but with resolve. And perhaps that is his final brilliance. He does not need to win to matter. He does not need to be loved or even feared. He only needs to endure, and in doing so, he becomes something the galaxy has never truly faced before. A villain who is not insane, not misguided, not monstrous for the sake of it, but deliberate, methodical, inevitable. In the annals of Warhammer 40,000 fandom, few figures evoke such polarized and passionate responses as Abaddon the Despoiler. He is both feared and mocked, revered as the architect of doom, and derided as Abaddon the Armless. This duality is not just a quirk of fandom. It is a reflection of the myth-making engine that surrounds him, a cultural battlefield as volatile as the Eye of Terror itself. For decades, Abaddon's reputation was tainted by a peculiar inertia in the lore. 12 crusades, none of which seemed to win in the traditional sense, gave rise to an enduring meme that he was a blustering warlord forever flailing against the Imperium's might, more a punchline than a nemesis. Abaddon became shorthand for Chaos's inability to get things done, a clown prince of entropy whose grand plans always fizzled into nothing. But this meme was born not from analysis, but from impatience. It stemmed from a misreading of the narrative scale. Abaddon's story is not told in issues of White Dwarf or the pages of a codex alone. It unfolds across centuries of in-universe time, requiring readers to see not the snapshot, but the arc. And as Games Workshop's storytelling evolved, with the fall of Cadia, the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum, and the rise of the Dark Imperium, the joke began to curdle into something darker. People started to realize that Abaddon had been winning all along, not with thunderous victories, but with the quiet, relentless dismembering of the galaxy's cohesion, and the fandom shifted. Fail-Abaddon still lingers, but it now carries a nervous irony. The man who was once a meme shattered Cadia. The one who always lost split the galaxy in half. Suddenly, the punchline had a body count in the billions, and the laughter turned to unease. This reappraisal has created a cultural whiplash, a rush to reevaluate a character once dismissed, to reinterpret his legacy in the wake of cosmic upheaval. Yet even this shift has layers. Some fans admire Abaddon not just as a character, but as a meta-narrative success. He is proof that long-term storytelling can work, that a villain can evolve from ridicule to reverence if given time and narrative weight. His transformation is not just his own, it is the fandom's. He reflects our need for villains who grow, who endure, who challenge our assumptions. In a franchise often dominated by static archetypes, Abaddon changed. Other fans see in him the archetype of chaos perfected. He is not a demon prince, not a frothing madman, not a servant of a single god. He is a strategist, a manipulator, a leader of men and monsters alike. He embodies what chaos could be if it had direction, a nightmare not of madness but of purpose. To these fans, he is the endgame of the heresy, the culmination of every grudge, every betrayal, every lost dream. And yet, there are those who still cling to the old narrative, who see the rise of Abaddon as forced, as a retcon, as an attempt to polish a character who spent too long in the shadows. They argue that the damage done by early depictions cannot be undone by a few recent victories, that the meme has more cultural weight than the lore ever will. And perhaps they're right, in part, because Abaddon is no longer just a character. He is a conversation, a battleground of perception. This dichotomy is, strangely, fitting. Abaddon thrives on duality. He is the heir of Horus, yet his own master, the servant of chaos, yet its manipulator, the butcher of Cadia, yet the strategist of the Long War. And now, in the eyes of fans, he is both a joke and a juggernaut. That tension gives him power. It keeps him alive in our discourse, forever argued, forever reinterpreted. What does it mean when a joke becomes real? When the character we laughed at grows into the character we fear, it means that the writers succeeded. That Abaddon is not static. He is myth, evolving with the community that observes him. He is a legend shaped by mockery and blood alike, and in that, he becomes more terrifying than ever, not because he was always strong, but because he never needed to be anything other than persistent. And that is the final irony. The fandom called him a failure, and he let them. He endured the laughter. And when the time came, he made the galaxy scream. There is a weight that lingers at the edge of every star map, every battle report, every astropathic scream echoing through the void, and that weight is Abaddon the Despoiler. For 10,000 years he has marched not toward glory, but toward collapse. He has not sought to win, but to break the very idea of winning. He has not claimed a throne because he seeks to burn them all. We have asked if he is a tactical genius or a lucky heretic. But perhaps the question is flawed. Perhaps it is not a matter of either or, but of scale. Because Abaddon is not defined by a single campaign or clever maneuver. He is defined by endurance, by ideology, by his ability to move the galaxy not through brute force alone, but through manipulation, subversion, and vision. His crusades were not failures. They were strokes in a masterpiece of entropy. His alliances were not dependencies. They were stepping stones. His psychology is not broken, it is refined. He has turned mockery into myth, setbacks into symbols, and time itself into a weapon. Compared to the gods, he is mortal. Compared to the Primarchs, he is born of lesser stock. Compared to Guilliman, he is unrecognized by Empire. And yet none of them have reshaped the galaxy as he has. None of them have carved a wound so deep that even the Emperor's light cannot fully cross it. None of them have stood, unwavering, in defiance of a universe that demanded they kneel. Abaddon is not lucky. He is not even particularly favored. He is what remains when everything else breaks. He is chaos undivided, not in worship, but in function, the one who made its madness move. His crusades are no longer counted in numbers. His name is no longer a warning. It is a reality, a gravitational inevitability drawing the galaxy toward darkness. So when you look at the state of the Imperium, the rift that splits its soul, the constant cries for aid that never come, remember that it wasn't a god or a demon that did this. It was a man, a broken, furious, brilliant man who turned loss into strategy and mockery into doctrine. And if you've enjoyed diving into the depths of that man's mind, if you've walked with me through his rise, his failures, his triumphs, and the shadow he casts, then subscribe. Because the long war isn't over, and together we will uncover every bloody chapter of it, one heresy at a time. Glory to chaos, or at least to the madness that makes the galaxy interesting.